groundbreaking new study gives us insights that we had not known, and that changes the picture of the Cascadia Subduction Zone, the big one. If you live anywhere from Vancouver Island, Canada, down through Western Canada, Western Washington State, USA, Western Oregon State, and Northern California, you have heard these words. The big one, the earthquake, the big one, magnitude 9+, that will rip open the Pacific Northwest, and the monster tsunami that will rush against the shore within only 8 to 15 minutes after impact. But what I'm about to explain right now changes how we think about the big one might actually unfold. It changes it, and it's important. There's a new study that, so to speak, has stress tested the Cascadia Subduction Zone, and they have used more than 1 decade of offshore data. So what they found, it's not simple, guys. I'll explain it to you, but it really, for me, it's groundbreaking. Well, hopefully not groundbreaking, but it changes what we thought would happen. Cascadia is not behaving like the one single smooth fault that you see on the map when you see it, that is just waiting to unzip. It's acting more like a chain with different sections, and those sections don't all behave the same way. We knew that before. We thought we can divide it in 3 sections, the north, the middle section, and the southern section that goes until Northern California, and we knew they don't have to rupture all 3 at once, but we didn't know which one and why. But this changes. Also, that picture changes. Let me explain this in the most simple way possible. The Cascadia Subduction Zone is where the Juan de Fuca plate is slowly pushing under the North American plate. We have a subduction zone along the famous Pacific Ring of Fire. So it moves around 4 centimeters per year. That's like 2 inches, 2.5 inches. That doesn't sound like much, but over decades and centuries, that motion is building up enormous stress. And now here's the key. Parts of that boundary are locked and loaded, and that's the dangerous area, right? That means they're stuck. They can't move. And then the plates are trying to move. They're pushing against this, right? But friction is holding the plates in place. So when locked sections finally break, that's when we get massive mega thrust earthquakes, magnitude 9+ territory, the kind that can generate, and in this case will generate, these monster tsunamis we're talking about, 100 feet or so, that will slash against the coast in only 8 to 15 minutes, against the coast, against the west coast here. It has to travel over the Pacific to reach the other areas of the Pacific Ring of Fire. So for years, Cascadia has been eerily quiet, very quiet. But if you compare it to other subduction zones, right? They have larger megathrust earthquakes on a regular basis. Japan, Kamchatka, we've seen that. Not many earthquakes here where I live. I live there, unfortunately. No, not unfortunately. It's beautiful. If the big one doesn't happen in this area, you're quite safe from natural disasters, right? It's just the worst disaster ever that's looming, and that's kind of overdue. So the quietness of the Cascadia Subduction Zone led scientists to think that large sections of the whole fault must be strongly locked and just building up stress. But this new research used something different to find out what is actually going on. Instead of just looking at the earthquakes and saying, oh, there's no earthquakes, it's quiet, they listened to the constant background vibration of Earth. So what do I mean with that? This is the natural seismic noise from ocean waves and environmental motion. Why does that give us insight into the Cascadia Subduction Zone? Well, by tracking tiny changes in how fast that vibration moves through the rock, they can detect whether the crust is tightening, whether it's loosening, cracking, or experiencing fluid movement. And that makes a huge difference what the crust is doing for where or what the big one might do. So if seismic waves start traveling faster over time, that usually means the rock is compacting. Stress is building, it's pushing against each other. If the waves slow down, it means there's cracks opening, fluids are moving, pressure's actually being released. So they looked at more than 10 years of offshore data because the Cascadia Fault is offshore. Offshore data from seafloor monitoring stations. There's one near Vancouver Island in the north, and there's two off the coast of Oregon in central Cascadia, as we can say. And what they found, here is where things get very interesting. Northern Cascadia, basically the Canadian area, Vancouver Island, Vancouver, where I am, it shows steady increase in seismic velocity over time. What does that mean for us that we live here? That means the rock there appear to be compacting. And I just explained what it means when they compact. Stress is building. So that's supports the idea that we've heard before that this northern section of the Cascadia Fault is, they say, strongly locked. And you've seen the images of Vancouver, Greater Vancouver areas. They're building high rises and towers like crazy. But also Vancouver Island, Victoria has all these old masonry buildings, many non-reinforced buildings that will collapse. It'll be a total disaster. I made a video about that. So northern section, it's loading up quietly. That is basically the classic setup for a very large mega thrust rupture. Great. Plates are stuck, but they're trying to move and energy accumulates. Well, at least if it happens, if I can film it, guys, and I'm live on the scene. No, really, just kidding. I don't really want to experience that. I really don't. But it is the fact. The energy is accumulating right underneath where I sit. So now let's compare this to central Cascadia. That's basically the coast of Oregon. We can call it central Cascadia and southern western Washington. In 2016, over a period of 2 months, the scientists saw something different in this area. The seismic velocity dropped. So this was not a sudden earthquake spike, but this was a gradual decrease. So that suggests actually that the rock temporarily loosened or experienced strain release in some way. So they interpret this as a shallow, slow slip event, basically, essentially a slow motion earthquake instead of snapping violently. Part of the fault slipped gradually over several weeks. So they estimate that the displacement was about 1 centimeter, a little less than an inch. That doesn't sound dramatic, but at those depth and scales, it is significant, guys. It is significant. And it didn't stop there. Between 2017 and 2022, they observed additional drops in seismic velocity in that central region. But also, these didn't match classic earthquake patterns. Instead, they point to fluid movement at the Cascadia Fault. So under the seafloor, there are faults and structures that we call proto-thrusts. Think of them as like early stage thrust faults in like the sediment wedge. And that dip angles beneath the measuring stations. There are also larger features like the Alvin Canyon Fault that is still down there. These structures can act like fluid highways. So what that means, they allow pressurized fluids that are trapped deep underground to migrate upwards. So is this good or bad? Fluids matter a lot because they change how faults behave. High fluid pressure can weaken rock and reduce friction. But fluid pathways can also allow pressure to dissipate. That could stabilize certain sections or influence how a rupture would spread. So what does that mean in simple terms? for the Cascadia Fault. Northern Cascadia here, high, looks more like a steadily locked system building up strain. Shizzy's hitting the fizzy there, probably first. Central Cascadia looks way more complex with slow slip events and fluid pathways that may actually be releasing some pressure intermittently. And here's the part that really matters for people asking. Where's the highest risk now? Whole Cascadia Fault. Where? The most clearly locked area in this data set is Northern Cascadia, no doubt, hello. That suggests the strong strain accumulation. But when we zoom out further, other research that maps the subduction zone shows it may be divided into at least 4 segments, 4 various segments. And these segments are not identical. So some are rougher with more structural complexity, but others are smoother and shallower. So one segment stands out in particular, and that is stretching from southern Vancouver Island down along Washington and into northern Oregon. It's described as smoother and at a shallower angle. So a smoother interface can allow rupture to travel more continuously along its length. A shallow angle means the earthquake producing boundary may extend farther inland beneath Washington's Olympic Peninsula. And that's not good because there's Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, all these areas highly densely populated, the Puget Sound. Not good. So that geometry that we have there could amplify shaking on land if that segment ruptures. On land. Isn't that great? As if this wasn't bad enough, right? So if you're asking which area stands out as especially concerning for strong shaking potential, this is the Washington to Northern Oregon segment that deserves attention because of its geometry and smoothness. But the thing is, I've reported a lot about if you go into Northern California, so don't think, so we go to Northern Oregon and Northern California. Watch my video about the Mendocino Triple Junction. That is not a triple junction anymore. It's now a 5 junction right now, where 5 tectonic plates are meeting, and then Shizzy is going to hit the fizzy there, plus the San Andreas Fault. Plus we now know that the San Andreas Fault and the Cascadia Fault have triggered each other in the past and will do so again. So this is also not great, right? But there's a nuance when we're talking about the smoothness, how this can trigger everything in this segment. None of this changes the long-term probability estimates for a full margin magnitude 9+ event. So those estimates remain roughly at a 10 to 15% chance over 50 years that we have the full rupture. What changes is our understanding of how the rupture might behave. So in some central sections, or if some central sections, I have to say, have fluid pathways and a slow slip behavior, they could potentially act as partial barriers. If the fault starts rupturing in one area and then the rupture travels, and there could be a barrier. So we have that. In some subduction zones around the world, structural complexities have limited how far a rupture actually propagated. But they can also act as wildcards. It is like this, right? A fault that behaves differently doesn't automatically mean safer. So that's the bad news. When you were getting excited that, they've got the Shizzy there in the north, we're better off, right? It doesn't automatically mean you're safer if you're in Southern Oregon or something like that. It means it's less predictable, guys. It's not better. Sadly, I have to say that. So the clean summary of this, that is what I can give you. Northern Cascadia appears strongly locked and loaded and building a strain steadily. Central Cascadia shows evidence of slow slip fluid transport that may modulate the stress and influence the rupture propagation. Doesn't help us in the north if we rupture first. Well, maybe it won't rupture all the way down to Northern California. Who knows? The Washington to the Northern Oregon segment, because it's so smooth and shallow in geometry, may be capable of rupturing more continuously and producing strong inland shaking. So you also have shizzy hitting the fizzy if it's more smooth, right? So Cascadia is not the one uniform ticking time bomb that we thought it was. It's a system of connected segments with different mechanical personalities, we have to say. I really don't like the stronger inland shaking. I really don't like that, I have to say. These mechanical personalities, some are tightly wound, some are leaking pressure, and whether these differences stop a future rupture or simply reshape it is the question that scientists are now trying to answer, but they haven't answered it yet. They're trying to figure this out. That's the real takeaway for me from this new study. It's not that the big one is canceled. I'm sorry. Nope, it's not. But it's also not guaranteed that it's going to happen tomorrow. But that fault line, that dangerous fault line beneath the Pacific Northwest is way more complicated and potentially way more unpredictable, which is really not good. More unpredictable. I thought we're learning more and more so that we might reach a stage where it actually would be more predictable to give us some warning time. It's not in the cards yet. I will keep you updated about this. Guys, I hope you like this. I've chosen a few videos here in the end screen. We can see each other in a second if you do that. If you want to support the channel, become a supporting channel member for behind the scene videos and my private life, what I'm doing in the Pacific Northwest. Click the join button or link us in the description if you want to fill me up with coffee to keep me going. Thanks for everyone who's supporting the channel with all that. Thanks for you supers. And hey, check this out. I see you in the next one. Choose one and I'll see you there. Bye-bye.